The fire truck siren was still wailing when I pulled up to my own gate. My own damn gate. The smell of burning rubber mixed with pine sap hit me like a slap across the face. Two identical blondes in matching yellow jackets stood there like bookends from hell, blocking my path to the lake. This area is closed for public safety. The one on the left barked it like she owned the place. Karen Mills, I'd learn later. Her carbon copy sister Sharon nodded along like a bobblehead on a dashboard. I rolled down my window, brass key already in my palm. My grandfather's key to these gates. Been carrying it for 8 years, ever since I moved out here after the divorce. Ladies, I think there's been a mistake. No mistake. Karen stepped closer, yellow jacket squeaking with every movement. The shoreline poses an immediate danger to children and families. We've filed complaints with the city. That's when I noticed the chain, brand new, wrapped around my gate like a steel snake. The padlock caught the afternoon sun, mocking me. If you're watching Conflict Story, you know it's never just about a locked gate. There's always something deeper, something uglier. I got out of my truck, boots crunching on gravel. This is private property, my property. Sharon spoke up for the first time, voice pitched exactly like her sister's. Your dangerous dock is threatening our lake ecosystem. We have documentation. Documentation. That word should have been my first warning. Within an hour, my phone started buzzing. Rick Patton from City Code Enforcement. Guy sounded like he'd rather be anywhere else. Jim, I got complaints about unsafe conditions at your dock. Gotta come take a look. Complaints from who? Multiple concerned residents. Says here there's erosion issues, structural problems with your boat slip. Papers rustled on his end. I'm required to investigate. By the time Patton showed up, the twins had vanished, but their damage was done. He walked my shoreline with a clipboard, shaking his head like he was viewing a crime scene. I don't see any structural issues, I told him. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Well, the complaints are pretty detailed. Photos of erosion damage, environmental impact assessments. More paper shuffling. I gotta write this up as a safety concern. $10,000 fine if you use the dock before we clear this. 10 grand for a dock my grandfather built in 1962. That night, I sat on my porch with a beer, staring at that chain. The brass key felt heavy in my pocket, useless now. In the distance, I could hear laughter from the Mills sisters' deck party, ice clinking in glasses, victory sounds. My boat sat trapped at the dock like a caged bird. Couldn't use it, couldn't move it. Patton had it marked as evidence in his safety investigation. Have you ever felt like your own life got stolen while you were looking the other way? The next morning brought worse news. Karen Mills had started an online petition. Protect our children from dangerous shoreline conditions. By noon, she had 67 signatures. By evening, the local Facebook group was on fire. Jim Steele is putting our families at risk. How long has this been going on? What else is he hiding? I watch my construction business take hits in real time. The Hendersons called to cancel their deck project. $23,000 gone. Sorry, Jim, but we can't be associated with safety violations. The Rodriguez family pulled out of their kitchen remodel the same day. Another 15 grand down the drain. By week's end, I'd lost 40,000 in contracts, all from a petition started by two women I'd never even talked to before that day at my gate. But here's what the twins didn't know about small towns. Information flows both ways, and sometimes it flows through unexpected channels. Margaret White had been the town librarian for 30 years, quiet woman, maybe 60, with the kind of sharp eyes that cataloged everything. She found me at Murphy's Tavern on Friday night, nursing my third beer and my wounded pride. Jim. She slid into the booth across from me, manila folder in her hands. I've been doing some research. The folder hit the table with a soft thump. Inside were photocopied maps, yellow with age. Property surveys from 1962, the year the state built the dam, the year they flooded half our valley to create the lake. Your grandfather didn't just buy that shoreline, Margaret whispered, glancing around like we were plotting a heist. It was compensation. The state took his house, his farm, everything when they built the dam. That waterfront, it was payment for what they destroyed. I traced the property lines with my finger, clear as day. Why are you showing me this? Because those Mills sisters have been in here every day this week, demanding copies of historical shoreline documents. They're planning something big. She closed the folder. These maps aren't in the digital system yet, only exist in hard copy. I slipped her $100 bill for the library's new book fund. She smiled and tucked the money away. What new book fund? That night, I spread the maps across my kitchen table. Every line, every measurement told the same story. My grandfather had paid for that shoreline with everything he'd lost: blood, sweat, and a drowned farm. But the twins were about to learn that I wasn't the only one with access to old documents. And in a small town, secrets have a way of surfacing when you least expect them. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with musty paper as I planned my next move. Outside, my chain gate caught the moonlight like a steel reminder. Tomorrow, I'd start fighting back. The gravel popped under my boots as Margaret's porch light snapped on. She'd called at dawn, voice tight with worry. "Jim, you need to see something. Now." I found her standing in her kitchen, yesterday's confidence replaced by something close to fear. The morning newspaper lay spread across her counter, and there it was, front page of the Valley Herald. Local environmental crisis threatens families. The photograph made my stomach drop. My dock, shot from an angle that made it look like a rotting death trap. The caption read, "Dangerous structure poses immediate threat to Crystal Lake ecosystem." "They move fast," Margaret whispered. "Too fast." The article quoted independent environmental expert Dr. Sarah Chen extensively. Phrases like catastrophic erosion damage and 50,000 in environmental restoration costs jumped off the page like accusations. But here's the thing about small towns. If you've lived here long enough, you know everyone. And I'd never heard of Dr. Sarah Chen. I was still staring at the paper when my phone rang. Sharon Mills, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Jim, we saw the article. We're so sorry this had to become public." "What do you want, Sharon?" "We're reasonable people. Maybe we can work something out before this gets worse." A pause, like she was reading from a script. "Karen and I are willing to mediate for the good of the community." The coffee in my mouth turned bitter. Mediate what exactly? Well, the environmental damage is extensive, but if you voluntarily remove the dock and restore the shoreline, we might convince Dr. Chen to reduce her assessment. Maybe drop it to $30,000 instead of $50,000. $30,000 to fix damage that didn't exist on property that was rightfully mine. "I'll think about it," I lied. "Don't think too long, Jim. The city council meets Thursday. This will be on the agenda." The line went dead. I looked at Margaret, who'd been listening to every word. Her face had gone pale. "Jim, there's something else." She opened another folder, this one thicker. "I kept digging after you left last night. Dr. Sarah Chen, she exists, but she's a marine biology graduate student at the State University. 26 years old. Never published a single environmental impact study." My coffee cup hit the counter harder than I intended. They bought her. Gets worse. The Mills sisters own Lakefront Realty. They've been buying up shoreline properties for 2 years, flipping them to developers. Your lot? It's worth $300,000 to the right buyer. $300,000 for property I'd inherited free and clear. That afternoon, I drove to Murphy's Tavern looking for answers and found half the town instead. The lunch crowd had turned into an impromptu town meeting with Karen Mills holding court at the big corner table. "Environmental responsibility isn't optional anymore," she was saying, voice carrying across the room. "We all have to make sacrifices for our children's future." I grabbed a beer and found a spot at the bar where I could listen. The bartender, Mike O'Connor, slid the bottle across with a knowing look. "How long has this been going on?" I asked quietly. Mike dried a glass with practiced efficiency. "Started right after the Henderson project got approved. You know, that lakefront mansion they're building 2 miles north? Karen's been sniffing around every private dock since then." The pieces started falling into place. Karen wasn't just targeting me. She was clearing the shoreline for development, one dock at a time. But she'd picked the wrong target. Around 3 o'clock, a young guy in khakis and a polo shirt walked into Murphy's. Asian, nervous energy, kept checking his phone. He ordered a coffee and sat alone near the window. I had a hunch. "Dr. Chen," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. He nearly jumped out of his skin. How did you—" "Alex, right? Alex Chen. I kept my voice low, friendly. I'm Jim Steele, the guy with the dangerous dock. His face went through about 6 different expressions before settling on guilty. Look, Mr. Steele, I can't talk to you. It's a conflict of interest. Yes, kid, you're 26 years old with a biology degree. What do you know about environmental impact assessments? More than you think. But his voice cracked on the words. I leaned forward. How much did they pay you? Alex stared into his coffee like it held the secrets of the universe. Outside, Karen Mills was getting into her silver BMW, talking animatedly on her phone. 5,000, he whispered. They said it was just a formality, that you were violating environmental regulations anyway. $5,000 to destroy my life. Alex, I want to show you something. I pulled out one of Margaret's photocopied maps. This dock has been here for 61 years. It was built before there were environmental impact requirements. It's grandfathered in under state law. He studied the map, and I watched his face change. The guilt turned to something else. Anger, maybe, or shame. They told me you built it last year without permits. They lied. Alex's phone buzzed, a text message. He glanced at it and his face went white. I have to go. Wait, I grabbed his arm. What did the message say? He showed me the screen, from Karen Mills. Remember our agreement, no contact with subject. Subject, like I was some kind of lab rat. That night, I called my old Army buddy Tom Jackson, who'd become the county's senior building inspector. We'd served together in Afghanistan, shared enough bad coffee and worse MREs to trust each other with anything. Tom, I need a favor, a real one. Name it. I need you to look at my dock, official inspection, by the book. Jim, if there's a problem, I'll have to write it up. There's no problem, that's the point. Tom arrived at dawn, clipboard and measuring tape in hand. He spent 2 hours going over every board, every support beam, every bolt. When he finished, he was shaking his head. Jim, this is one of the most solid docks I've ever seen. Your grandfather built this thing like a fortress. He signed his inspection form with a flourish. Structurally sound, zero environmental impact. Hell, I wish all the new construction was this good. I had my ammunition now, official documentation from the county's top inspector, but I also had something else, a graduate student with a guilty conscience and a paper trail of lies. By Thursday morning, the whole town was buzzing about the city council meeting. Karen Mills had done her job well. Nearly half the population would be there to watch me get crucified over my dangerous dock. But as I sat on my porch that morning, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise paint the lake gold, I couldn't help but smile. The twins thought they were hunting a wounded animal. What they didn't realize was that wounded animals are often the most dangerous. Tonight, at that council meeting, they were going to find out exactly what kind of animal they had cornered. The city council chambers smelled like old coffee and tension. 200 people packed into a room built for 50, and every eye was on me as I walked through that door. The Mills sisters sat in the front row, like queens at their own coronation, matching navy blazers and smug smiles. Mayor Bob Taylor called the meeting to order, his gavel echoing off the walls. First item on the agenda, the Crystal Lake shoreline safety concern. Karen Mills stood up, clutching a thick folder like it was the Holy Grail. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, concerned citizens. Her voice carried across the room with practiced authority. We're here tonight because one man's negligence threatens the safety of our entire community. The crowd murmured approval. I stayed seated, letting her dig her own grave. Dr. Sarah Chen's environmental assessment clearly shows catastrophic damage to our lake ecosystem. She held up glossy photographs. Erosion, structural failure, toxic runoff from deteriorating materials. More murmurs. A few people turned to stare at me like I was some kind of environmental terrorist. Sharon Mills rose to stand beside her sister. The financial impact alone, $50,000 in restoration costs, should be enough to take immediate action. Thank you, ladies. Mayor Taylor nodded. Mr. Steele, would you like to respond? I stood slowly, feeling the weight of 200 hostile stares. Mayor, I've lived on this lake for 8 years. My dock has been there for 61 years, never caused a single problem. But the environmental assessment, Karen started, is a lie. The room exploded, shouts, gasps, someone in the back yelling about proof. Mayor Taylor hammered his gavel like he was building a house. I waited for quiet, then pulled out Tom Jackson's inspection report. This is an official county assessment, completed yesterday by Senior Inspector Tom Jackson. 0 structural problems, 0 environmental impact. Karen's face flushed red. That's impossible. Dr. Chen's report was written by a 26-year-old graduate student who's never done an environmental impact study in his life. I let that sink in. Alex Chen, marine biology student at State. The same Alex Chen you paid $5,000 to lie about my doc. The temperature in the room shifted. I could feel it, like a storm front moving in. Sharon Mills shot to her feet. That's a serious accusation without proof. I have proof. I pulled out my phone, opened the voice recorder app. Alex Chen, recorded yesterday at Murphy's Tavern, admitting to taking $5,000 for a fraudulent assessment. The audio quality was crystal clear. Alex's nervous voice filled the chamber. 5,000. They said it was just a formality, that you were violating environmental regulations anyway. Then my own voice. They told you I built it last year without permits? And Alex again, they lied. You could hear a pin drop. Karen Mills looked like she'd been slapped. Sharon was staring at her sister with something approaching panic. But I wasn't done. Mayor, I'd also like to submit these historical documents, courtesy of our town library. I handed Margaret's photocopies to the clerk. Property surveys from 1962 showing that my grandfather's shoreline was a compensation for land, seized by the state for dam construction, legal title, clear and uncontested for 61 years. Mayor Taylor studied the documents, eyebrows climbing toward his hairline. Mrs. Mills, do you have a response to these allegations? Karen stood frozen for a long moment. Then something shifted in her expression. Not defeat, calculation. Mr. Mayor, even if there are irregularities in the initial assessment, the fact remains that private docks pose inherent risks to public waters. Perhaps we should consider a comprehensive shoreline management plan. Smart. She was trying to pivot from fraud to public policy. But I'd been expecting this. That's interesting, Mrs. Mills, especially coming from someone whose real estate company has been buying lakefront properties specifically to remove private docks for development projects. Another murmur through the crowd. This one sounded different. Suspicious. I pulled out another document. Public records show Lakefront Realty, that's Karen and Sharon Mills, has purchased 4 shoreline properties in the past 2 years. Each time, the first thing they did was remove the existing dock and sell to commercial developers. Sharon Mills finally found her voice. That's legitimate business. Legitimate business doesn't require fraudulent environmental assessments and paid-off graduate students. The crowd was getting restless now. I could hear whispered conversations, people putting pieces together, the Henderson Mansion project, the Riverside development, the marina expansion that nobody wanted. Karen Mills played her last card. Mr. Steele is deflecting from the real issue, public safety. You want to talk about public safety? I stood up straighter, feeling momentum shift my way. Let's talk about Alex Chen's text message from you last night. I held up my phone again, showing the screenshot Alex had let me photograph. Quote, remember our agreement, no contact with subject. Signed, Karen Mills. The mayor leaned forward. Mrs. Mills, did you send that message? Karen's silence stretched long enough to answer the question. Councilman Pete Rodriguez spoke up for the first time. Mrs. Mills, are you saying you had a financial arrangement with this Dr. Chen? We hired a consultant for legitimate environmental assessment. A consultant who just admitted on tape that you paid him to lie. The room was buzzing now, conversations breaking out everywhere. Mayor Taylor hammered his gavel repeatedly. Order in the chamber. When quiet finally returned, he looked directly at the Mills sisters. Ladies, in light of these revelations, I'm suspending any action on the shoreline safety matter, pending a full investigation. Karen Mills gathered her papers with shaking hands. As she headed for the exit, she passed my seat and leaned down to whisper, "This isn't over, Steele." But her voice lacked the confidence it had carried an hour earlier. After the meeting, people crowded around me in the parking lot. Handshakes, apologies, promises to spread the word about what really happened. Margaret White beamed like a proud teacher whose student had aced the final exam. "Jim, that was brilliant," she said, "but you know they won't give up this easily." She was right. As I drove home that night, I could see lights on at the Mills house across the lake. Emergency meeting, probably, planning their next move. But I had something they didn't expect: Alex Chen's guilt, Tom Jackson's integrity, and a 61-year-old doc that had weathered storms they couldn't even imagine. The brass key felt warm in my pocket as I unlocked my front door. Tomorrow, I'd cut that chain off my gate. Tonight, I'd plan for whatever the twins threw at me next. Because in small towns, when you corner someone, they don't always run. Sometimes they fight back harder than you ever imagined. The bolt cutters went through that chain like it was made of paper. Saturday morning, first light, and I was finally reclaiming my own gate. The satisfying snap of breaking steel echoed across the water as the chain hit the gravel with a metallic thud. My boat rocked gently at the dock, free at last. I ran my hand along her hull, checking for any damage from 2 weeks of forced imprisonment. She was fine, built to last, like everything my grandfather touched. But the peace didn't last long. Alex Chen called while I was loading my fishing gear. Kid sounded terrified. "Mr. Steele, they know I talked to you. Karen Mills showed up at my apartment last night with some guy I've never seen before." "What kind of guy?" "Big, expensive suit, talked like a lawyer but moved like..." Alex's voice dropped. "Like someone who breaks things for a living." I set down my tackle box. "What did they want?" "They offered me another $10,000 to recant my statement. Say I was confused, coerced by you." A long pause. "Mr. Steele, I'm scared." 10,000 more. The stakes were climbing fast. "Alex, you still have that recording of our conversation?" "Yeah, but..." "Email it to me, right now. Then pack a bag and visit your parents for a few days." After he hung up, I stood on my dock thinking. The Mills sisters weren't just doubling down. They were going nuclear, which meant this was bigger than just my property. The answer came Monday morning, delivered by registered mail. A notice from the County Planning Commission. Public hearing scheduled for Friday. Subject: Proposed Crystal Lake Shoreline Development Overlay District. I read it 3 times before the implications hit me. They weren't just targeting my dock anymore. They were trying to rezone the entire shoreline for commercial development. Every private dock, every family cottage, every piece of waterfront property not already in their control. The brass key felt cold in my palm as I called Margaret White. "I already heard," she said before I could speak. "Karen Mills filed the petition last week, right after your city council triumph. She's claiming public safety concerns require comprehensive shoreline management." "How many signatures does she need?" 50% of affected property owners. There are 43 shoreline lots. She needs 22 signatures. I did quick math in my head. How many does she have? 18, as of yesterday. And Jim? Margaret's voice carried a warning. She's been offering some very generous terms to holdouts. That afternoon, I drove the shoreline road, stopping at every property I could reach. The Hendersons were apologetic, but firm. "Jim, they're offering us $50,000 above market value. We can't turn that down." The Rodriguez family told the same story. "It's not personal, man, but with Carlos starting college next year..." By evening, I'd talked to 14 property owners. 12 had already signed with the Mills sisters. 2 were wavering. I was losing. That night, I sat on my porch with a beer, watching lights flicker on across the lake. Somewhere over there, the Mills sisters were counting signatures and planning their victory celebration. But then something caught my eye. A small boat moving slowly along the far shoreline. No lights, engine barely audible. It disappeared around a bend near the old Henderson place. Curious, I grabbed my binoculars. The boat reappeared 20 minutes later, still running dark. As it passed under a dock light, I caught a glimpse of the pilot. Sharon Mills, alone in a boat at midnight, checking shoreline properties. The next morning brought news that made my blood run cold. The Patterson cottage had burned down overnight. Electrical fire, the volunteer fire department said. Total loss. And coincidentally, the Pattersons had been one of the 2 holdout families I'd talked to yesterday. Nobody was hurt. The cottage had been vacant for the winter. But Frank Patterson called me around noon, voice shaky with more than just smoke damage. "Jim, the damnedest thing. Karen Mills called me this morning, right after the fire trucks left. Offered to buy my lot for cash as is. Said she wanted to help us avoid dealing with insurance headaches." "You didn't sign anything, did you, Frank?" "Hell no. But Jim, That fire started right near the electrical meter, and I had that whole system inspected last month. Everything was perfect. I hung up and stared at my own electrical meter. New fear crawled up my spine like ice water. The last holdout family, the Washingtons, called that evening. Elderly couple, been on the lake longer than anyone except me. Mrs. Washington sounded exhausted. Jim, they're not making offers anymore. They're making threats. Karen Mills showed up with papers saying our septic system is contaminating the lake. Says if we don't sign, she'll file complaints with the state environmental agency. Eleanor, is your septic system working fine? Of course it is. We had it pumped and inspected 6 months ago. Her voice cracked. But Jim, we're 78 years old. We can't fight lawyers and government agencies. We just can't. I closed my eyes. 21 signatures. One more, and the Mills sisters would control the entire shoreline. But that night, as I sat planning my next move, my phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Steele, this is Cindy Rogers from the Valley Herald. I'm investigating reports of unusual activity around the lake properties. Do you have a few minutes to talk? A journalist. Normally that would set off every alarm bell I had, but I was running out of options. What kind of unusual activity, Ms. Rogers? Property owners receiving pressure to sell, environmental assessments that don't match county records, and now a convenient fire at a holdout property. Papers rustled on her end. I've been tracking the Mills sisters' real estate transactions. Very interesting patterns. What kind of patterns? They've been working this same playbook in 3 other counties over the past 5 years. Environmental scares, fraudulent assessments, pressure tactics, always targeting waterfront properties for development deals. I felt something shift in my chest. Hope, maybe, or just the recognition that I wasn't fighting this battle alone anymore. Ms. Rogers, what would you need to run this story? Documentation, recorded conversations, on-the-record sources willing to go public. A pause. And about 48 hours before they reach that magic number of 22 signatures. 48 hours. The Friday hearing was in 3 days. I can get you documentation, but Ms. Rogers, I looked out at the lake, at my dock silhouetted against the moonlight. If you're wrong about this, if you burn me, I lose everything. Mr. Steele, I've been covering small-town corruption for 15 years. The Mills sisters aren't as smart as they think they are, and from what I can tell, they've never faced someone who fights as dirty as they do. After she hung up, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Alex Chen's number. The kid had sent me more than just that audio recording. He'd sent me Karen Mills' entire email chain about the fake environmental assessment. Time to see if the Mills sisters were ready for a real war. Because tomorrow, I was going to give them one they'd never forget. The phone rang at 5:30 Wednesday morning. Eleanor Washington, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. Jim, they took Harold to the hospital. Heart attack. Right after those men left our house. Ice ran through my veins. What men, Eleanor? 2 of them said they were from the state environmental agency, had badges, official papers. They told Harold our septic was poisoning the lake, that we'd face criminal charges if we didn't sign the development agreement immediately. I was already grabbing my keys. Which hospital? County General. Jim, I'm so scared. Harold's been on heart medication for years, but the stress... Her voice broke completely. I found Eleanor in the cardiac unit waiting room, looking 20 years older than she had yesterday. Her hands shook as she signed the hospital forms. Mrs. Washington, those men who came to your house, did they leave any paperwork? She pulled a crumpled document from her purse. Official-looking letterhead, State Environmental Agency logo, detailed allegations about septic contamination. It looked real until you read the fine print. The agency address was wrong. The director's name was misspelled. The whole thing was a fake. But Harold Washington didn't know that when his chest started tightening. I called Cindy Rogers from the hospital parking lot. They've escalated. Fake government documents, intimidation tactics that put a 78-year-old man in cardiac intensive care. Jesus, are you sure they're fake? The State Environmental Agency moved offices 2 years ago. This document has their old address. I took pictures with my phone. Plus, I called the real agency. They have no record of any investigation at the Washington property. That's felony impersonation of federal officials. We can nail them with this. But even as she said it, I knew we were running out of time. The The Mills sisters had 21 signatures. If Harold Washington died, or if Eleanor signed under duress while he was fighting for his life, they'd have their majority. That afternoon brought worse news. Frank Patterson called with defeat in his voice. "Jim, I signed." Karen Mills showed up with her insurance adjuster friend, said the fire damage was so extensive that my policy might not cover it. Offered me $150,000 cash to avoid the hassle. 22 signatures. The Mills sisters had won. But as I sat in my truck outside the hospital, watching Eleanor pace the cardiac waiting room, something occurred to me. I pulled out my phone and called Margaret White. "Margaret, I need you to check something. How many of those 22 signatures are legally valid?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if some of those property owners were coerced or lied to or signed under false pretenses? What if we can prove fraud?" Papers rustled on her end. "If we can demonstrate that signatures were obtained through fraudulent means, they'd be invalidated. But Jim, proving fraud is..." "Leave that to me. Can you meet me at the library in an hour? Bring everything you have on property law and signature validation." That evening, I had my battle plan. Cindy Rogers had agreed to hold her story until after Friday's hearing. Alex Chen was driving back from his parents' house with a lawyer his father had hired. And I had something the Mills sisters didn't know about. Thursday morning, I walked into the county planning office and requested copies of all 22 signed agreements. Public record during the hearing process. The clerk handed me a thick folder without question. I spread the documents across Margaret's library table like a crime scene investigator. What I found made my blood boil. 3 signatures were dated before the owners had even received the development proposal. 2 were signed by people who'd moved out of state months earlier. 1 was signed by Janet Morrison, who'd been in a nursing home with dementia for 6 months. But the smoking gun was Harold Washington's signature, dated yesterday at 3 p.m., 3 hours after his heart attack. I called Eleanor. "Did Harold sign anything yesterday?" "Harold hasn't been conscious since the ambulance arrived." "Why?" I closed my eyes. They had forged a dying man's signature. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood on my dock, looking across the water at the Mills house. Lights blazed in every window. Victory party, probably. Champagne and laughter, while Harold Washington lay in intensive care. But you know what? Sometimes the best revenge is just showing people exactly who they really are. Friday morning dawned gray and cold. The Planning Commission hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. By 9:30, the courthouse was packed. Every property owner on the lake, half the town council, reporters from 3 counties. Word had gotten out. The Mills sisters sat in the front row, matching power suits and confident smiles. Karen carried a leather briefcase like she was closing a billion-dollar deal. Chairman Davis called the hearing to order. "We're here to consider Petition 2025 LC07, requesting establishment of the Crystal Lake Shoreline Development Overlay District. Mrs. Mills, you have the floor." Karen Mills stood and smiled at the crowd like a politician on Election Day. "Mr. Chairman, concerned citizens, thank you for this opportunity to protect our precious lake resources. With 22 property owners' signatures representing a clear majority, we respectfully request approval of this vital environmental protection measure." Applause from her supporters. She was playing this perfectly. "However," I said, standing up before she could continue, "I'd like to challenge the validity of those signatures." The room went silent. Karen's smile faltered for just a moment. Chairman Davis frowned. "Mr. Steele, this is highly irregular. Do you have grounds for such a challenge?" I pulled out my own folder. "I have documentation proving that multiple signatures were obtained through fraud, forgery, and criminal impersonation of government officials." The explosion was immediate. Shouts, gasps, someone yelling about proof. Davis hammered his gavel repeatedly. "Order, Mr. Steele, those are serious allegations. Do you have evidence?" I walked to the front and handed him Harold Washington's forged signature, along with the hospital admission records. Harold Washington allegedly signed this agreement at 3 p.m. yesterday. These medical records show he was unconscious in cardiac intensive care at that exact time. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Karen Mills had gone white as paper. "Furthermore," I continued, pulling out more documents, "Janet Morrison's signature is dated last week. Mrs. Morrison has been in memory care with advanced dementia for 6 months. Her power of attorney confirms she's incapable of signing legal documents. Sharon Mills shot to her feet. These are desperate accusations from someone trying to block legitimate development. And this, I said, holding up the fake environmental agency document, is the fraudulent paperwork your representatives used to intimidate the Washingtons. Federal crime, carrying up to 5 years in prison. The crowd had gone dead silent. You could hear the heating system cycling on. Chairman Davis studied the documents with growing alarm. Mrs. Mills, do you have an explanation for these discrepancies? Karen Mills stood frozen for a long moment. Then she grabbed her briefcase and headed for the door. This hearing is a sham. Our lawyers will be in touch. But she was walking toward 3 men in dark suits who'd just entered the back of the room. FBI agents based on their bearing. Cindy Rogers had apparently made some calls after our conversation. As the agents approached Karen Mills, I felt a hand on my shoulder. Eleanor Washington, somehow managing to smile despite everything. Harold woke up this morning, she whispered. First thing he said was, "Don't let them win, Eleanor. Don't let them win." I looked around the room at my neighbors, my community, people who had been ready to sell their heritage for promises of easy money and environmental protection. The brass key felt warm in my pocket. Some things are worth fighting for, even when the fight nearly kills you. But this war was far from over. The FBI agents led Karen Mills out in handcuffs, while her sister Sharon sat frozen in the front row, like a deer in headlights. The courthouse erupted, people shouting questions, cameras flashing, reporters shoving microphones at anyone who'd talk. But I wasn't watching the circus, I was watching Sharon Mills. She sat there for maybe 30 seconds after her sister disappeared. Then she stood up slowly, gathered her papers, and walked straight to me. "This isn't over, Steele." Her voice was ice-cold calm. Karen was always the hothead. I'm the one who actually gets things done. Before I could respond, she was gone. That should have been my first warning. The hearing dissolved into chaos. Chairman Davis postponed any decision pending the FBI investigation. Property owners crowded around me, some apologetic, others still angry, most just confused. Margaret White beamed like a proud teacher, but even she looked shaken by how far the Mills sisters had been willing to go. I drove home feeling like I'd won the battle, but somehow made the war worse. Sharon Mills wasn't done. She was regrouping, and people who forge signatures and fake heart attacks don't usually give up just because their sister got arrested. That night, I sat on my dock with a beer, trying to process everything. Harold Washington was stable, but would need weeks of recovery. 3 families had lost their life savings to fraudulent deals. Alex Chin was probably going to need witness protection after testifying against organized real estate fraud. Have you ever won something important and immediately wished you'd lost instead? My phone buzzed around midnight. Text from unknown number. Check your dock in the morning. A friend. I grabbed a flashlight and walked down to the water. Everything looked normal. Boat secure, dock solid, all my equipment where I'd left it. But something felt wrong. That prickly sensation between your shoulder blades when someone's watching you. I was right to be paranoid. Saturday morning, I found the first surprise. A survey crew, 3 guys in orange vests, measuring my shoreline with expensive equipment. "Morning," their supervisor said cheerfully. "Just doing some routine boundary verification for the county." Nobody told me about any survey. He consulted his clipboard. "Work order came in yesterday. Says here you requested verification of your property lines after the recent dispute." I hadn't requested anything. "Can I see that work order?" The paper looked official enough, but I knew my own signature. That wasn't it. "Sorry guys, but this is fraudulent. You need to leave." The supervisor shrugged. "Your call, but the county's going to want this survey completed before they process your dock permit renewal." Dock permit renewal. I'd had the same permit for 8 years, automatically renewed every January. It wasn't due for another 6 months. After they left, I called the county planning office. The clerk sounded confused. "Mr. Steele, our records show your dock permit was suspended pending environmental review. You received the notification last week." I never got any notification. It was mailed to, 1247 Lakeshore Drive. My address was 1274 Lakeshore Drive. "Ma'am, that's the wrong address." "I'm sorry, sir, but according to our records, that's the address on file for your property. It was updated last Wednesday by the property owner." Wednesday. The day after the city council meeting, where I'd exposed Karen Mills. Who updated my address? I can't release that information over the phone, but the form was signed by James Steele on file. Another forged signature. I spent Saturday afternoon at the county office, sorting through the bureaucratic nightmare Sharon Mills had created. My address had been changed, my permit had been suspended, my property taxes had been flagged for assessment irregularities. Even my voter registration had been mysteriously updated to the wrong precinct. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. But the real masterstroke came Sunday morning. I woke to find my boat gone, not stolen, legally repossessed. According to the papers duct taped to my door, I'd defaulted on a marine loan I'd never taken out. The signature on the loan documents looked perfect, better than perfect. It was my actual signature, somehow copied from legitimate papers and transferred to fraudulent ones. I called the repo company. "Gentlemen, that loan is fraudulent. I paid cash for that boat 8 years ago." "Sir, we just enforced the paperwork. You'll need to take it up with Lakefront Marine Lending." Lakefront Marine Lending. I'd bet my last dollar it was owned by Sharon Mills. That afternoon, Alex Chin called from his lawyer's office. "Mr. Steele, they're coming after me too. Someone filed a police report saying I committed perjury in my statement about the environmental assessment. There's a warrant out for my arrest." The net was closing. Sharon Mills was systematically destroying everyone who'd stood against her sister, and she was doing it all legally, using the system against us. But she'd made one mistake. She thought I was just a stubborn old man with a dock and a grudge. She didn't know about my 20 years in military intelligence, or the skills you learn when your job is finding people who don't want to be found. That night, I started digging. Sharon Mills wasn't just a real estate agent. She was the silent partner in 6 development companies across 3 states. Her financial records showed a pattern: target waterfront properties, use legal pressure and bureaucratic manipulation to force sales, flip to commercial developers at massive profits. But the beautiful thing about people who think they're smarter than everyone else, they always leave traces. I found the smoking gun in the county clerk's computer system. Sharon had filed dozens of document updates over the past month, all using a clerk access code that belonged to Jennifer Walsh, who'd been on vacation in Hawaii for 2 weeks. Jennifer confirmed it when I called her Monday morning. "Someone's been using my login? That's impossible. I'm the only one who knows that password." "Jennifer, who has access to your office when you're out?" "Just the cleaning crew and, oh hell, Sharon Mills. She hired her cleaning company to do our offices. They have keys to everything." The pieces fell into place. Sharon Mills had bought access to the county computer system through her cleaning company. She could file any document, change any record, create any bureaucratic nightmare she wanted. But knowing how she was doing it wasn't enough. I needed proof that would stand up in court. Tuesday afternoon, I got my chance. Margaret White called in a panic. "Jim, they're at the library. Sharon Mills and 2 men with badges, demanding access to all the historical documents I showed you. They have a warrant." I was there in 5 minutes. Through the library window, I could see Sharon Mills directing 2 fake federal agents as they stuffed Margaret's files into evidence boxes. The same play they'd used on the Washingtons, but with better props this time. But I'd been expecting this. The night before, I'd installed a small camera in Margaret's filing room, military surplus, motion activated, impossible to spot unless you knew where to look. It had been recording everything. As I watched Sharon Mills orchestrate the theft of public documents, I smiled for the first time in weeks. She thought she was cleaning up loose ends. What she was actually doing was handing me enough evidence to destroy her. The brass key felt warm in my pocket as I drove home to review the footage. Tomorrow, Sharon Mills would learn that some old dogs know tricks she'd never even imagined. But tonight, I had a phone call to make to a very interested FBI agent. Agent Sarah Martinez arrived at my house Wednesday night with 2 other FBI agents and a laptop full of questions. The camera footage from Margaret's library was better than I'd hoped. Crystal clear shots of Sharon Mills directing her fake federal agents to steal public documents. "Mr. Steele, this is exactly what we needed," Martinez said, replaying the video for the 3rd time. "Document theft, impersonation of federal officers, systematic fraud. We can tie this to everything her sister was doing." But I had bigger plans than just another arrest. Agent Martinez, what if I told you I could get Sharon Mills to confess to everything on tape? She looked up from the laptop. That would be ideal, but why would she confess? Because I'm going to make her an offer she can't refuse. Thursday morning, I called Sharon Mills. She answered on the first ring, voice honey sweet with false friendliness. Jim Steele, I wondered when I'd hear from you. Sharon, we need to talk, face to face. About what? About how we can both get what we want without destroying each other. A long pause. I'm listening. Meet me at Murphy's Tavern tonight, 8 o'clock. Come alone and bring your lawyer if you want. But let's end this war before it kills us both. She agreed, probably thinking she held all the cards. What she didn't know was that Agent Martinez would be at the bar, along with recording equipment sophisticated enough to pick up whispers from 50 feet away. That afternoon, I had one more stop to make. The county hospital, where Harold Washington was finally sitting up in bed, looking frail but determined. Harold, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. He nodded. When those fake agents came to your house, when they threatened you with criminal charges, did Sharon Mills ever speak directly to you? Eleanor, sitting beside his bed, gasped. She was in the car, Jim. Sharon Mills sat in the car the whole time while those men terrorized Harold. She never got out, never said a word, but she was directing them. I saw her pointing, telling them what to do. Perfect. Conspiracy charges, criminal enterprise, racketeering. Sharon Mills had built herself a federal case that would put her away for decades. 8 o'clock at Murphy's came fast. Sharon Mills walked in, wearing a black business suit and confidence like armor. She sat across from me in the same booth where Alex Chen had confessed his part in her sister's scheme. So, Jim, what's this generous offer you mentioned? I leaned forward, making sure my voice would carry clearly to the FBI's recording equipment. Sharon, you've been using the county computer system to file fraudulent documents. You've been impersonating federal agents. You've been systematically destroying people's lives to steal their property. She didn't deny any of it, just smiled. Prove it. I can prove all of it. Video footage, computer records, witness testimony. But here's the thing. I don't want to destroy you. I want to make a deal. Her eyes narrowed. What kind of deal? You return my boat, clear up all the bureaucratic mess you've created, pay restitution to the families you've defrauded, and leave Crystal Lake forever. In exchange, I don't turn over my evidence to the FBI. She laughed. Actually laughed. Jim, you're more naive than I thought. Do you have any idea how much money is at stake here? My sister and I have $12 million in development contracts riding on that shoreline. You think I'm going to walk away from that because you threaten me? 12 million? The casino development alone is worth $8 million in commissions. The marina expansion, the conference center, the luxury condos. We're talking about transforming this entire lake into a destination resort. She leaned back, completely relaxed. Your little dock is just the first domino, Jim. Once it falls, everything else follows. She was confessing to everything. Agent Martinez was getting it all on tape. Sharon, those fake environmental assessments, the forged signatures, terrorizing elderly people. Was it worth it? Worth it? She laughed again. Jim, you still don't understand. There are no fake assessments. There are no forged signatures. There's just paperwork that says what it needs to say to get the job done. What about Harold Washington's heart attack? For the first time, her smile faltered slightly. Collateral damage. The old man should have signed when we made our first offer. And Janet Morrison, the woman with dementia whose signature you forged. Janet Morrison signed those papers fair and square. If she doesn't remember signing them, well, that's not my problem. I stared at her across the table. Sharon, do you hear yourself? You're talking about destroying people's lives like it's just another business transaction. Because that's exactly what it is. She stood up, gathering her purse. Jim, you can fight this all you want. But you're one man with a 60-year-old dock and a handful of sympathetic neighbors. I'm a multi-million-dollar development corporation with lawyers, political connections, and unlimited resources. She leaned down close to my ear. Your grandfather's little legacy is going to become a parking lot for the casino shuttle boats, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. She was walking toward the door when Agent Martinez stepped out of the shadows. Sharon Mills, FBI. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, racketeering, and violation of federal criminal statutes. The handcuffs clicked shut with a sound like destiny. You have the right to remain silent. The bar went completely quiet. Even the jukebox seemed to hold its breath. As they led Sharon Mills away, she looked back at me one last time. This isn't over, Steele, but I could see in her eyes that she knew it was. 6 months later, the Mills sisters both pled guilty to federal conspiracy charges. Karen got 8 years, Sharon got 12. The casino development was canceled when investigators discovered it was financed with laundered money. The marina expansion died when environmental reviews found actual problems with the proposed site. My boat was returned, my permits were restored, and the county implemented new security protocols to prevent future computer system breaches. But the real victory came the day Alex Chen called to tell me he'd been hired as the county's new environmental compliance officer. Kid had found his backbone after all. I still live on the lake, still use the dock my grandfather built. The brass key hangs on my kitchen wall now, next to a photo of the old man who taught me that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. Sometimes I walk down to the water in the evening and think about the Mills sisters, sitting in their federal prison cells, probably still planning their next scheme. Some people never learn that when you corner an animal, especially an old one, you better be prepared for the fight of your life. The lake is peaceful now. My neighbors are my friends again. And every morning when I unlock that gate, I remember what Harold Washington said in his hospital bed. Don't let them win. We didn't. And sometimes that's enough.